So the Sinister Cup is the competitive format for the Silph Arena in October. So if you are a Pokemon Go heavy PvP combatant, then you already know what the rules of this cup are. But if you don't know what they are, don't know what I'm talking about, go check out silph.gg, get learned up on the Sinister Cup and the Silph Arena in general. At any rate, let's get into the picks here on my graphic. The art, of course, is by the Flork of Cows, not me, but I am always willing to use these graphics when I can. But yeah, so as far as getting into the picks here, I'm going to make my face disappear because I didn't design this graphic with my head being in the corner in mind. So, bye guys. Alright, now that that loser's gone, let's talk about the Sinister Cup picks. First off, we have the staples. First staple I want to talk about here is Alolan Marowak. So at first, if you checked out my live stream, I was kind of anti-Alolan Marowak. I thought it was as good as the other ghosts. It was just another option. But we got that update in. It now has Fire Spin, and I feel like Fire Spin has solidified Alolan Marowak's role in the Sinister Cup. It is now a staple. You want to have one on your team for sure. What makes Fire Spin Alolan Marowak so good though, when I didn't like it with just the Hex? Well, for one, it beats Steelix now. Yeah, it just beats Steelix, which is huge, because Steelix is the kind of ugly Pokemon that very few things can really manage in the Sinister Cup, and Alolan Marowak is like, hey, I just beat you now with Bone Club and Fire Spin. And if you're worried about the ghost matchups, like, hey, you don't have Hex now, that's effective damage. Well, the majority of those matchups were already decided by if you could land the Shadow Ball or not. And that situation still exists. Like, even in the mirror, do you get the Shadow Ball or not? That will be the determining factor on who wins that battle. So not having Hex doesn't really hurt those matchups too much. And you're still able to potentially overcome Poliwrath with Fire Spin because of the Shadow Ball, potential to land that situation. So I feel like overall, this has made Alolan Marowak a pretty big force in the meta. Next up, we have Poliwrath. Poliwrath is in an interesting spot here. So of course, Power Up Punch got nerfed, so that kind of sucks. But Poliwrath is still swanging. And the reason why is because Poliwrath had two main things it was doing in this cup, which was beating Steel-type Pokemon and being able to manage Ghost-type Pokemon with Bubble and Ice Punch. Well, Bubble and Ice Punch, that has nothing to do with Power Up Punch, so it's still able to do that job. And then as far as managing Steel-type Pokemon goes, even though it's not able to just whomp on them as quickly as it could before, it still beats them. So, Poliwrath is definitely still here, with the Bubble, the Power Up Punch, and the Ice Punch. I also want to make note of the Mudshot Power Up Punch Hydro Pump set. It's a risk-reward kind of set. With the Hydro Pump, you have the final word in a lot of battles. You just nuke them. And I feel like a lot of people don't shield Poliwrath, especially for the first charge move, because they're going to be expecting the Power Up Punch. Well, then they get hit with a truck, and that truck is called Hydro Pump. And that is why that's not that bad of an idea. And then later on in the fight, they might be expecting the Hydro Pump, but it's actually the Power Up Punch. You just got the bait in. They shielded that, and you're still close to the Hydro Pump, which could be the deciding factor in those fights. Is it better than the Bubble Power Up Punch Ice Punch? I wouldn't say necessarily better. It's just a different flavor. And speaking of different flavors, we got frickin' Steelix over here. So Steelix is still doing Crunch and Earthquake. That hasn't changed. But we have a new fast move. Thunderfang. So T-Fang versus Dragon Tail. Which is the better fast move? That I definitely do not have the authority to give a final word on right here. It is an interesting debate. So the Thunderfang does give you more damage in a lot of matchups, and it also gives you effective damage on Poliwrath and Polion and Drifblim. So that's pretty cool. And then on top of that, it does allow you to overcome an opposing Steelix in the one shield scenario. Basically, you're able to chonk them down with the T-Fang damage before they're able to get to their closing charge move. So that could be pretty big if that plays out. As far as the Dragon Tail goes, the Dragon Tail gives better energy gains, which allows you to reach your charge moves faster, which could be pretty telling in a lot of matchups. Right now, which one is the bigger pull? It's really hard to say. There's arguments for both sides, and PvPers that I know that are definitely more experienced than I am are still kind of debating it themselves. So go with whichever one you feel, whichever wisdom directs you towards the right fast move that you want to use on your team. Flip a coin if you need to. Now getting into the groups here, you're used to me having arrows going one or which way, showing you which matchups are good, which matchups are bad. In this cup, I feel like some are very obvious, but some are extremely subtle. the main determinant of victory in the Sinister Cup is going to be your ability to bait shields and your ability to hold on to shields, more so than the matchups themselves. And for that reason, I'm not giving you a bunch of arrows. As far as matchups where you just win no matter what, they should be extremely obvious to you. But as obvious as they can be, one shield could tilt things, so be wary. So first up, we have the Ghost Gang, and the Ghost's main defining feature is that they can beat everyone, and they can also lose to everyone, depending on the circumstances, so they're pretty tricky in that respect. They generally have trouble with Steel types and Poliwrath, and I feel like, along with Alola Marowak, you're going to want to have an additional one on your team. Then next up, we have the Con Club, the Confusion Club, if you will. And they're mainly here to slap Poliwrath. That's like their main mission. They're extremely slow at reaching their charge moves, and the majority of Steel types laugh at them. So you can use one on your team, but if you want to give these guys a pass, that's definitely an option. And I know Gardevoir is part of the Con Club. It uses Charm, so keep that in mind. Then we have the Steely Boys. Confusion, they don't care about it. Ghosts, they laugh at them. Steelix and Poliwrath, they'll lose, of course, but they work for them. They're on a team, right? So it's not that they lose to those guys, it's just that they beat things that threaten them. So they work together, very cohesive. And you're definitely going to want to have an additional Steel type on your team. Going triple Steel is also a consideration. Then the final group I have down here is La Resistance. Now, I made this graphic initially before the changes to Power Up Punch and changes to the meta overall. So how important La Resistance is definitely diminished these days, but Metachamp still has its place, right? So it counters Poliwrath, still does that. Counters Steel types, still does that. Gets eaten by Ghosts and Confusion. That really hasn't changed either. So Metachamp lost because Power Up Punch got diminished, so that's some serious power for Metachamp that got reduced. And then also because of that, the presence of Poliwrath is definitely less so now than it was before. So then your ability to go in there and counter Poliwrath, well, if they're not using Poliwrath, how are you countering Poliwrath, right? But you did gain. Psychic did get a boost. It's cheaper now, does bigger damage, has a possible debuffing effect. So if you got a Metachamp, I'd say consider it. It's definitely not out of the race, but it is kind of a risky pick. So keep that in the back of your mind. And if you are using Metachamp, counter is definitely the fast move of choice. As far as your charge moves go, I really can't direct you on which charge moves to use. It's kind of sloppy complicated, and I haven't looked at the matchups now that everything has changed close enough to really guide you on that. So getting into the groups here, I kind of have a concentrated version of this graphic I want to bring up. So while all the Pokemon featured in the previous graphic are viable, I feel like these 6, the Sinister 6 if you will, are going to be what's going to come up the most and what are going to be the most consistent for you to use. So starting out, we have Empoleon. Empoleon has Waterfall, and Waterfall is basically an unresisted confusion in this cup, which is huge. If you are considering a second Steel type, second to the Steelix of course, it is the best Steel, in my opinion. No getting around that. You could have reasons to not use Empoleon, and I respect that, but please respect that I feel like Empoleon's freaking insane here. Now, of course, Poliwrath, Omega lulls at this guy. This guy does not threaten Poliwrath whatsoever. So yeah, definitely a very solid Pokemon. You can throw it at Steelix, you can throw it at Whack, and you can just win. Definitely have to consider it for your team. Then next up, we have the Mawile down here. It has a lot of hype with it because of the Power Up Punch being added to it. It doesn't care that Power Up Punch is weaker now because it's boosting its bite damage, and bite is the name of the game. So this thing is fast and furious. It eats Ghosts, it eats Psychics. If your opponent gets trapped with a Ghost out or a Psychic out, or their last Pokemon is a Ghost type or a Psychic type, and your last Pokemon's Mawile, you're probably going to win that fight. Now, as much swag as Mawile has, I don't really like it, personally. It falls flat versus all 3 of the staples. And you're often going to see all 3 staples on the same exact team. So these are 3 Pokemon that beat you that are extremely important in this cup. And then on top of that, Empoleon says hi. Just, what does this do against Empoleon? It loses. It loses to Empoleon. Now, for the haters out there doubting me about the Alola Marowak matchup, yeah, Alola Marowak beats it with Fire Spin and Bone Club. So watch out. Unless you're willing to burn 2 shields for your Mawile, you're going to come out of that fight behind. And even if you do burn 2 shields, your Mawile is going to lose to the next Pokemon that comes in. So Mawile, you're really good. I know a lot of people love you. I don't. Then next up we have Dusclops. So Dusclops initially had a bunch of swag because it was like the only Ghost type that could manage the Steelix. But now we got Alolan Marowak doing that job way better. So, kind of awkward for Dusclops here. Awkward spot. So it can beat all three staples, given the right circumstances. But, of course, like a Ghost-type Pokemon, as mentioned, it can lose to all three of them. Its main selling point is that it's thick and it's fast on the draw with its Fire Punch and its Shadow Punch, the Ghost Punch attack. So it's pretty fast with that, but its main problem is that those hits are a little bit too soft. So you might be doing a little bit too little too late with this guy. Now as far as the fast move goes, there's a lot of debate between Hex and Feint Attack. Hex lets you reach your charge moves faster. Feint Attack gives you higher baseline damage. At the end of the day, I think it's up to you. This matter, out of my hands. Put it in the hands of Dusclops. Then next up, we have Drifblim. And Drifblim, I like a lot better than the Dusclops here. So I feel it is the most dynamic ghost in this cup, because it has the Bait Attack with Ominous Wind, but it also has the Nuke with Shadow Ball. No other Ghost-type Pokemon that's viable for this cup really has that action going on. It's either all nukes, like Banette, or it's just all soft baits, such as Soft Hands over here. Big ol' hands. Why did Flork draw your hands so big? I don't know. Back to Drifblim. It also has a 10% chance to go ham. You use Ominous Wind, you get the boost, now you're going ham, which is awesome. It's not good because of the boost. The boost is the extra spice. So already good, even without the 10% chance to go insane, and now it also has a 10% chance to go insane. Of course, it struggles with Steel-type Pokemon, so that kind of sucks. And then Poliwrath has Ice Punch. And Ice Punch is something that this thing does not like to suffer. So overall, I'd say if you are looking for your 6th team slot Pokemon or your 5th team slot Pokemon, you want another ghost, but you don't know which ghost to pick, this is the answer. Then going on to the Confusion users, first I want to mention Claydol. So Claydol has some pretty sweet swag going on. It can beat all three of the staples given the right circumstances. The big problem with Claydol, because that sounds pretty cool, so there's got to be a drawback, right? It's got poor matchups versus basically everything else. So Claydol, yeah, a little bit of a risk here. Now there is a secret strat charge move combo I want to turn you guys up on. Earth Power with Earthquake. That sounds insane, right? But the big deal with it is often Earth Power hits too softly to close a lot of the matchups that it's meant to win, where Earthquake is the final word. I also feel like opponents won't be expecting Earth Power and Earthquake to be on the same set, so then they're like, okay, that guy just used Earth Power, it's going to be double Earth Power, my Steelix can handle that, and then you drop the Earthquake, and they're like, oh no. So I feel like that is a pretty big deal for the Claydol. Like, consider the endgame situation. You reach the Earth Power, you use it, you still lose. You reach the Earthquake, you use it, you win. Like a situation where you have one shield and your opponent has no shields, but they'd be able to reach 2 charge moves, but you can only reach 1, you know, that kind of stuff. Earthquake could come in clutch there. So if you are a Claydol master, I'd say definitely think about that moveset. Psychic, when are you going to use Psychic? And Gyro Ball? Well, what? No. Double Earth. Claydol, I would consider it for my team if Cresselia wasn't so insane. Right now, I don't have the right IVs. You know, I don't have a Great League Cresselia yet, so if I miss out on it, I may have to go to the Claydol side of the force. But I do love the Cresselia. Now, you might be wondering, why Cresselia? Cresselia is not as dynamic as the Claydol is. It doesn't have earth moves to kill things that you think might beat it. What Cresselia does have, though, is extreme thickness. It is the thickest of the thick, and it can just wear down so many opponents just by brute tanking things that other Pokemon cannot handle. So that's pretty huge. And then when it comes to a lot of the matchups being like you cleaning something up and then going into the next matchup, this thickness allows it to clean up relatively unencumbered. So yeah, it's so thick, it's almost unfair, really. But Ghost types, Steel types, they can manage the Cresselia pretty well. But if they are on the back foot, Cresselia can overpower them pretty easily, so watch out for the Cresselia. And then final Pokemon that's not featured here, but definitely warrants mentioning, is the Gardevoir. Gardevoir with Charm. A lot of things don't resist Charm, so you can just rip straight through stuff. And then you also have Shadow Ball, which is the final word in many of these matchups in this cup. So Gardevoir, definitely don't consider it out. You might have a good IV Gardevoir from its special day, And if you do, this could be the cup to whip it out and use it. Big problem Gardevoir has, though, that holds it back in my heart of hearts, is the fact that, you know, Fire Spin Boy here resists. Steelix has a pretty good matchup there. And then if any of the ghost types kind of get the one up on it, then it's pretty much over for Gardevoir. So, yeah. And there you have it, the Sinister Cup Simplified. If you enjoyed this content, you want to see more like it, well then subscribe to SwagTips, man. And if you got any questions on this content, comment below. Let me know what's up. I'll be happy to help you out. I'd also like to give a special shout out to T4Dry, Manaholics, and Lorma96 from the Game Press crew. A lot of our discourse on these matchups helped, you know, shape my perspective here and gave me some extra insight that I wouldn't have otherwise. The Battle Matrix has been a little bit on the fritz lately, and that's my main way of trying to collect initial data, and so that really hasn't been working out for me. So there's a lot of like undercover strats here that came to light thanks to them. So thank you guys so much for helping me out with this.